Welcome back to Merch Disrupted, where we explore the future of the $350 billion branded merchandise industry. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Irys Kornbluth, co-founder of Everywhere Apparel. With a groundbreaking technology that transforms textile waste into 100% recycled cotton garments, Irys is leading the charge towards truly circular apparel. In this episode, we'll dive into how her innovation is tackling the global textile waste crisis and reshaping branded merchandise for a sustainable future. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about the next era of merch. Welcome, Irys. Good to
Thank
have
you
you.
so much, Alex. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah. So, I just for the listeners, Irys and I have known each other for, gosh, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years. And
Yeah.
I've always kind of been more in like the, shirt to customer kind of world. And the whole kind of like, dirt to shirt world is
Yeah.
not really my thing. But, you know, I know enough to be dangerous. And when Iris told me about her technology, and kind of it blew me away. And the more I've learned, it's just incredible. And it's also been incredible to kind of see your company evolve and your catalog evolve and all of that. So, yeah, maybe I'll hand it over to you, and why don't you give everyone a little bit of your background?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's an honor to be here. As you mentioned, I work on the dirt to shirt side of the decorated apparel supply chain. So actually, what we're doing is not just it's I guess more like trash to shirt,
Right.
fiber to shirt,
Yeah.
because we're basically making products out of 100% waste materials. So it's completely averting going around any need to farm natural fibers. And so in doing that, we're creating an extremely low impact product. This is a product that uses virtually no water to produce, whereas a cotton t-shirt uses up to 800 gallons of water per t-shirt
Oh my
just to grow
gosh.
the cotton and the fibers, yeah.
That's
And that
crazy.
doesn't include other ancillary environmental impacts like any pesticides used to grow that cotton or the carbon emissions of actually like cultivating and ginning that cotton.
Yeah.
So what we do is we take waste materials, kind of if you're watching this on the video, it's kind of like what's behind Alex's head right now, a big mound of textile waste, and we use mechanical shredding, which is like something you'd be familiar with in your office with a paper shredder, but it's just on a really large scale. It takes fabrics and shreds them down into tinier fibers until they can be respun into new yarn. And so the waste scraps and garments is really where our process starts. And once we have the yarn, we knit, cut, and sew those materials just like you would any other t-shirt, but it's a very low impact, global recycled standard certified 100% cotton, recycled cotton product.
Wow. Yeah, because I knew even before we met, I knew kind of like, the claim whenever you see kind of like recycled cotton or organic cotton, like um you have to be pretty skeptical about those claims.
Oh yeah, I mean, people still to this day are like, I thought you couldn't make 100% recycled cotton. And they have their reasons for saying that. Most manufacturers won't use 100% recycled cotton. They'll blend it with other things like recycled polyester or like do like a 70% recycled cotton, 30% virgin cotton or organic cotton blend. What we're doing is really that full 100% product, and it is possible. We have certifications on the material and test results. So it did definitely take a lot. It was a lot of banging a head against like a factory wall trying to figure out how do we knit this stuff? How do we finish it so that it performs like other fabrics? But we finally got to the bottom of it. I'm actually wearing one of our products right now. This is one
Oh,
that's
nice.
actually. um, so yeah.
That's great. And so how did you, well, maybe first let's talk about the kind of like the problem here. I mean, I know little bits and pieces. One statistic that I've heard is there's like, I don't know, 92 million tons of textile waste every single year or something like that. Is
Hmm.
that right?
I think those metrics are likely underreported.
Wow.
I have been, it's very hard to track textile waste because of the current resale market where groups like Goodwill, Salvation Army doing amazing work reselling products, but they can only resell 60% of those items that they receive.
Mm,
So the remaining 40% gets brokered off by the container and it goes abroad. So it's very hard to measure textile waste.
interesting. So it just kind
And
of like disappears into the void.
yeah, I mean, it would be great to put some sort of like geo trackers on these containers, figure out where they end up. I mean, a lot of them end up overseas, a lot of them end up in South America. There's a where
Mhm.
there's, the resale market of our resale market is in South America, mostly in some parts of Central America, and then a lot of these products end up in West Africa, where, there are entire cities that are, their beaches are basically full of textile waste.
Oh
And
my
actually,
gosh.
some really interesting nonprofits working in those regions. One of them is called the Ore Foundation. They're doing a lot of their own independent research on textile waste, both the sources, what we can do with those materials, how they impact the local communities. So I definitely recommend checking that out. But back to your original point, I think it's very hard to track. What I tend to focus on are what are our capacities for recycling? And then when you look at the overall amount of produced apparel on the planet, like what does it mean in terms of what's falling out of that system? So some of those stats are like, less than 10% of clothes are actually recycled at end of life.
Wow.
Um, so that's not just like recycled into a new t-shirt, that's recycled in any way. So
Yeah,
shredding,
like handed down.
insulation, yeah. And
Wow.
then less than 1% of clothes are recycled into other clothes. And so that's what we do. We're kind of in
Wow.
that very small category. Um, and then, like I mentioned earlier, with the resale market, having spoken with some, from firsthand conversations with some large resale businesses like Goodwill, they're reselling about 60% of what they receive. And just one location of Goodwill that I spoke with recently in Southern California, they were cycling 7 million pounds of textiles a year through about 10 of their stores. So if that's just one region, I
Yeah,
think the problem is a lot bigger than we think it is.
that's crazy. So is that right that so you said that only less than 10% of all clothing gets recycled in some form? Is giving it to Goodwill a form of recycling it?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and that terminology is interesting because Goodwill has often used that term, that like donating is like recycling. We also
Right.
get confusion on that as well. A lot of people come to us wanting to donate merchandise to us, and so I think there's general confusion about recycling, donating. Recycling to me really means, you're taking a end of life product, so that's something that can no longer be resold through
Mm-hmm.
Goodwill or Salvation Army or Depop or eBay or whatever it is. And you're able to actually turn it into something that has a second life of, hopefully decades, whether
Yeah.
that's another garment or a piece of insulation. Textile fibers can be used in freezer bags, to insulate sandwich bags, to insulate lunch
Mm-hmm.
bags. There's actually a lot of downcycled markets for textile fibers that I would consider in the category of recycling, but there's also a debate there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will be very vehement about calling that downcycling. Um, but to me, that would fall under the umbrella of recycling. What we're doing is kind of the gold standard of recycling, where you're turning the same product into a product of equivalent value. So you're going from textile to textile.
Right. 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 Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how, just if I mean, a lot of times I think in the apparel industry we talk about sustainability, particularly in like blank garments around like the dyeing process and like what type of cotton is used and kind of these that there's like certain kind of I don't know variables that that they tend to focus on in terms of like sustainability,
Hmm.
but it feels like kind of maybe like the big elephant in the room is, well, just how many products are produced, and
Yep.
then like what happens to those products, like when, throughout
Yeah.
the, obviously there's a time that somebody's wearing those products, or maybe there's a time that somebody's not wearing those products because they produced them and never sold them.
Yep.
And and then like even if somebody buys that product, like, after they're done with it, just all of that compounding, day over day, year over year, it's
Yeah.
pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, there is inefficiency throughout the entire supply chain and market of apparel. It starts in the raw material. So, at every stage of converting a fiber into a fabric and then a t-shirt, you're losing 5 to 15% of your yield, whether that's fibers falling off, the machine, it could be scraps coming off of a cutting line. And then once you get into the actual like consumer market, you have dead stock, which is overproduced items that can't be sold.
Hmm.
You also have store returns. So these are items that consumers buy and then, return. We're speaking with companies like, very large online retailers who have this problem where people are returning a lot of merchandise. And then you're right, all the way on the post-consumer side, when people have products in their own closet and then they're doing like a spring clean out and they don't know what to do with them. So there's various points, of fallout that's creating this big textile waste problem that we have.
Yeah. Crazy. So tell me a little bit, I guess, if you could maybe, as much as you can without sharing any like trade secrets or anything like that, but if you could just walk us through maybe sort of, if I take this shirt and, how does it end up, in your hands? What do you do with it? How does it all work on your side?
Yeah. So we have a recycling program that's available to anyone on our website, everywhereapparel.com, where you can find basically a mailer. We'll send it out to you. You can put your items of clothing in it, and there's a label to send the items back to us. We also do other interesting things like employee recycling drives. So we just did something like that with a large fashion company. They set up bins in their workplace, and we picked those up once they did like an Earth Day collection. And we're talking about doing similar programs for larger employers who have different employee sites where people are wearing uniforms and there's a lot more merchandise turnover. So, um, also, if you happen to be wearing an everywhere shirt, if you look on the inside of the t-shirt, there's actually a label, a QR code label that you can
Mm,
put on, and that will give you all the instructions to recycle not just this product, but any item of apparel that you'd like to recycle with us. So that's the basic mechanism. I think that consumers are still getting used to the idea of recycling clothing because most people, I bet if we did like a nationwide survey, most people feel like just bringing a bag to Goodwill
right.
is a solution, when it's not, and there's so much more of that story, both domestically and also globally, that needs to be talked about. But we're giving people a means of sending products to us. Once we receive them, we do sort through them by material content. So we'll pull out cotton rich and 100% cotton items. We'll separate out blends. Any like majority synthetics we'll also put in their own category. And then we take those types of fibers into the best recycling pathways, with the cotton actually aggregated to become part of our own supply chain. And that's where our interaction with the print on demand marketplace really starts,
Yeah.
because what we can do with a lot of textile waste is turn it into new t-shirts and merch, and we can turn it into pretty much any item of basic apparel, and it's a perfectly good substitute for it. And it's just, basically the shirt that I'm wearing, it has a fifth of the carbon emissions of a regular t-shirt,
Wow.
and it uses a significantly less amount of water. And so as the market becomes more interested in sustainability and sustainable options, that's, I think our product catalog is really going to grow especially for people doing, I think print on demand because there's a lot of campaign driven selling in print on demand. There's a lot of influencers who, they want their merchandise to reflect their values. And they're also really, really conscious that they have an audience of people who are going to be critical of their choices.
Yep.
And so I think this sort of collective culture is making people choose a little more wisely about like what blank apparel they're using for their products and merch.
Yeah, I mean, well, and also, I mean, the combination of print on demand plus, circular apparel is pretty much the most sustainable thing you could do in terms of making merch because, you know, obviously in print on demand we're eliminating that dead stock problem. I don't know
Yep,
what percentage of waste is attributed to dead stock, but I know it's significant. And so then you remove that piece. You're also producing typically closer to the customer with print on
yep,
demand because
totally.
most of the time you have localized fulfillment. And then you combine that with a circular product. um, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, if that's 10 times more sustainable or 100 times, I don't know what the number is there, but it's I would say that's the most sustainable possible route that you could go in terms of producing producing apparel at scale.
Yeah, couldn't
In
agree
kind
with
of,
you
yeah.
more. And maybe we can collaborate on an LCA on that because I totally agree with you. I mean, when you're having to push a customer into an MOQ of 144 pieces that they may not even sell, over the course
Right.
of months, it does generate a lot of waste.
Yep.
And I would also add like the inks for print on demand, generally speaking, using those water-based inks for DTG is
Hmm.
also great, considered, more sustainable than plastisol.
Yep.
I can't really speak to direct to film as much. I don't know enough about the materials used in that kind
Yeah.
of printing, but um, just there's a lot of waste averted by
Yeah.
making stuff on demand.
Yeah, the biggest problem in waste with DTF, and still, it's way more sustainable than a lot of things. But it's the film. So I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of people working on, what do we do with this film? How do we recycle it? How do we make it sustainable? And I know there's a lot of people working on that problem. So definitely looking forward to, to improvements being made there. But you have water-based ink, and
Yep.
you're using a very small amount of ink as well, because it you know you it sticks on the shirt so well because it has an adhesive backing. um, but I really think that all of these things that we've seen, and we talk about them a lot. We're going to talk about them a lot on this show. Trends towards um, things being produced in smaller quantities, closer to
Hmm.
the customer, with much less lead time,
Yep.
is just a trend in general, and things have been
Yeah.
trending that way for the last 15 plus years. E-commerce, COVID's impact on supply chains, the fact that consumers want more personalized kind of
Yeah.
products that speak to them on a more emotional level,
Hmm.
than just like a generic brand that you would buy at a big box retail setting. And so yeah, I mean, all of those things are setting like the perfect stage for this, for trending towards sustainability. But
Totally.
I really think that, going back to your point about like kind of the ideal customer of your product right now, it's interesting because we work with a lot of people on like the corporate side. So whether it's like a large corporation that's doing corporate merch, or like in licensing, like a big
Yeah.
sports or entertainment property. And people will say, you'll hear the word sustainability from the marketing team or somebody, like, oh well, we really want it to be sustainable. And then or we really want it to be made in USA. We really want it to be we really want it to be
Mm,
organic, um, and then they kind of like peel back the onion and realize like, oh, it's going to be too expensive, or they don't have enough a product assortment, or it only it's not. And so it's just exciting to see that, even since when we first met. I mean, I think when we first met, you had one shirt, and
yeah.
now you have a whole catalog, and your recycling program has expanded. And so, just I think as that as that concept grows exponentially,
Hmm.
and other companies start to adopt this mentality, I really do think it will go from, it's going to be exciting to see it go from kind of just, people who really, really care and insist about, having it that
Sure,
way,
sure, sure,
to
sure. Yeah.
like more of the norm.
Yeah, yeah, we love those evangelists like within large companies that are like, no, we can't make the wrong decision. But I agree with you, like we need this to be a widespread, adoption of these ideas in order to make a market-wide impact. So yeah, I think it's definitely been growing for us over the past few years. We actually just we started the company in like 2019, so
Yeah.
we haven't been around that long, and I think COVID actually supported our growth in some ways because it was a time when a lot of companies had to cancel promotions, they had to cancel in-store events, and so they saw that at a moment's, notice, their whole system could become this big source of waste generation.
Mm,
Not only that, but the warehousing space is very expensive. When you don't sell
right.
items or you accidentally overproduce or you miss your projections or whatnot. So COVID was a time when we had a lot of those big corporate entities coming to us wanting to recycle, and it kind of catalyzed this way of thinking, which is it was a nice little side benefit of a pretty shitty time, but
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
um,
Print on demand had the same kind of, it was, everybody was scared at first, and then there was a huge influx of demand of people trying to, move to a more efficient, localized strategy.
yeah, totally. But I will also say like there are reasons for companies, at least on the company level, to adopt our solution. One of which is because the recycling rates are so low in apparel, there's actually a really high risk that your logo, a product printed with your logo or your IP or your artwork, will ultimately end up in a landfill
Mm,
and degrade your brand, degrade your artwork, cause some sort of legal issues with licensing. So those are conversations that we try to have with companies as well. I mean, certainly, the major licensors are going to be very interested in that.
that's really
And
interesting. I
then,
never thought about that angle.
yeah, yeah. We have a lot of luxury brands for who are acutely aware of that. Um, you know, Anyone seeing a luxury logo anywhere near a landfill is going to be a huge
Yeah,
liability for them.
yeah.
It's also something that in the case of one of our customers, it's like it can be called out on TikTok, and
Hmm.
before you know it, your brand is getting canceled
Right.
because you haven't taken care of a process for end of life for your products.
Hmm.
So that's a really big, big part of the conversation that I think isn't talked about enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, yeah, certainly like the luxury brands, it makes a ton of sense. Or any brand that, any large brand that's pushing like a ESG sustainability kind of push, and then all of a sudden there's an image like the one behind me of like all their clothes piled up in a landfill.
Yeah,
That's not really
and
a
actually,
good look.
the Orr Foundation, since they're located in the Kanemanto market in Ghana, which is where a lot of these textiles end up, they are actually going through the landfill and counting, the number of this brand, that brand,
Wow.
and categorizing it. And I think that's really important because it puts accountability on to the brands. And, you can't really ignore these things anymore because we all have smartphones. We're all connected on social media. We're all sharing this knowledge. And so I think brands are having to become more accountable.
Yeah.
Also because of some new regulations that are very exciting for anyone in waste management. But here in California, we do have a new regulation that is basically going to charge clothing brands fees if they sell over $1 million into the state of California, which is a lot of brands.
Yeah, for sure.
So you'll be charged a fee that will help cover the end of life processing of
Hmm.
your product. The only way to reduce those fees is to have end of life recycling partnerships in place, processes for dealing with some of your dead stock, waste fallout, if you have resale programs, if you have mending programs. So that's going to come into effect in the next couple of years, I think.
Wow. Yeah, I also think about like the like the hot market as they call it for sports, so
Hmm.
like when you have the Super Bowl or a
Oh,
playoff
yeah.
match, right? And they have to pre-produce for both outcomes, because
Yeah,
they want to be able to sell it like as soon as, the match is over.
for sure.
They need it to be like on the shelves, like ready to buy. Obviously, like I think print on demand can help with a lot of that. Like you shouldn't maybe you pre-produce enough just for like that moment, and then you
Hmm.
kind of can leverage, print on demand or just in time for the rest. But being able to, potentially like pre-produce two outcomes, knowing that one of them is going to go through this, recycling process, which is way uh, better for the environment, better for their brand, much better than just shipping it off to some. I think they used to like ship it off to other countries where people would actually be wearing these garments
Yeah.
of other outcomes, and I've heard that now they just like destroy them, which is, pretty pretty horrific.
Yeah. Yeah, that hot market is something we should definitely get into. And as you were saying that, I was imagining like, well, what if we had a print on demand factory underneath the football stadium? Just
Right,
like
right, right.
while the game's going on, we're kind of like
Yeah,
monitoring. But yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant, idea of like blending more print on demand into even those larger corporate programs. It definitely is like a more sustainable way of going about it. And to your point on destruction, I mean, that is one of the value propositions that our process offers because in shredding textiles, you're completely destroying any logos, you're destroying any IP. But I think what you're referring to is they probably burn them.
they burn them. That's what I meant. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
they're not spending the money to go through your process at all. I think they're just straight up burning them.
Yeah, and the burning thing is like incinerating clothing is illegal in parts of Europe. It's not illegal here. There are some new technologies around gas capture and incinerating that maybe are evolving into something. Although just the general premise is that if you're not even going to attempt to turn that product into something else, it's considered like kind of a wasteful
Yeah,
way of going about it. But I actually have been looking at some of these waste to energy solutions and trying to study like, is there anything there that could actually create more of a positive impact than a negative impact? And I think part of the problem is that there are too many products. I mean, if we
right,
saw burning as a solution for everything, we would be creating a lot of issues like atmospherically because
right.
there's just too much.
Yeah,
And it doesn't actually solve the problem in the long term because you're not investing in and practicing those circular practices that are going to keep industries going. So that's kind of the problem that I see with with incineration. Although
yeah.
I am kind of studying some of the technologies that are coming up there.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if it could be more sustainable, that would be better. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think not producing something that shouldn't be produced in the first place, and then being able to take things that already have been produced, and turn them into, reusable things is that to me that sounds like the best possible path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very achievable in promo. And I think we have a really nice fit within this market because the catalog doesn't change 10 times a year.
Hmm.
If anything, we're maybe launching one new garment body every 6 months or a year, or launching new colors. And so I think it's a really good experimentation ground for these circular principles, because how many black t-shirts are y'all printing in print on demand?
Oh yeah, it's yeah, black, navy red, heather gray.
Yeah.
I think when I started in print on demand, when we were producing, I don't know, like tens of thousands a day, I think like the black large unisex crew neck was 40% of
Yeah.
the entire volume. So yeah,
Yeah, it's that is an opportunity in the world of circularity, because if we can just keep that going, learn how to do it, keep bringing those recycled products to market from the same waste stream, we're just
yeah,
gonna get better and better at this.
yeah. Well, and last week, Chris Robbins and I were talking about kind of how promo can how promo can start leveraging print on demand more, and making it more of like a main focus versus kind of like not a focus at all, or just like
Right,
a necessary evil that they have to figure out to keep to remain relevant. And the strategy in print on demand is a little bit different than in promo, where in promo you're trying to have like a large catalog of all this different stuff, so that you can kind of aggregate, these huge purchase orders and try to, oh, and by the way,
right,
you should have, oh, and you should have this type of product and the water bottle and this thing and this, and of course customers are always going to demand those products. It's not like you can't go into just any merch deal and say like, well, we're the black t-shirt company and this is all you need.
right.
Um, but at least in print on demand, by making it so easy and efficient to launch products, and it's so easy for consumers to buy without or businesses to buy without any upfront cost, without aggregating all that inventory and moving it across the world. um, there's a lot that you can do with just having like variety of designs and
Mm,
art on category basic type products,
sure.
and having like a store that's always on 24/7, that you're controlling for the client. Even though you're not getting 50 $100,000 purchase orders of all this stuff up front, but I think over the it's it's a it's a better way for the customer, and I think over the course of like a year, distributors might find that it's an even more valuable strategy for them, and it
Yeah,
allows them to not, to kind of focus on category basics while still being able to source and get the other things, versus kind of like overwhelming the customer with this like huge
yeah,
catalog of all these, different tchotchkes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, those catalogs can be very overwhelming
Yeah.
from firsthand.
So okay, so let's talk about the next like 10 years. How do we scale this? Like what are the biggest pain points? What are the biggest bottlenecks in the process? How do we go from, where you are today to like, where Gildan is today, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main sticking points we're finding out, it's two things. One of them is consumer, you know, confusion and misinformation around sustainability and greenwashing. This is a big, it's like one of our enemies, because people still quite, actually, some people come to us thinking our t-shirts are organic cotton.
Hmm.
Strange. Like there's a lot of these like words that people are confounding and confusing with each other. So
Yep.
recycled is different from organic, and then really educating consumers on what is the difference, how does that match up in terms of environmental impact, and then really making sure they understand what that environmental impact means on a practical level, like how many years of drinking water does 1,000 t-shirts you know represent.
Yeah.
So putting it in sort of more relatable terms on education, I think, is one of the big challenges we have right now. We're doing a lot of that on our website. We have regular blog posts about sustainability. We are trying to gather more of our own LCA data, which is life cycle assessment data around our products, and just do a lot more awareness communication around that. I think the second thing is that product market fit sort of price point
Yep.
conversation, which is what everyone brings up, when they think and talk about sustainable products. Well, is there a green premium on this? Or, oh, I know it's going to be more expensive, or we can't do it because it's out of budget. So that's where I think actually alignment with industries like print on demand is critical, because in print on demand, we actually are pretty competitive, I think, with some of the larger blank suppliers, in the sense that we can be way more flexible when it comes to smaller volumes. We can be way more flexible, even doing custom, t-shirt shapes, because
Mm,
like what you're saying, a lot of the people using print on demand, they are looking for something more unique, especially if they're a larger celebrity, they may want their own cut of something. That's somewhere where we have a competitive advantage. So I think riding the wave of growth together with print on demand is something I've been thinking about a lot. I think when you look at the at scale production, like of a Gildan, for example, um, they are taking a lot less margin than we are, I'm sure, because they're operating at a much larger scale. And so I
sure.
think the challenge there becomes, how do we start producing? Uh, it's kind of a catch-22 when it comes to sustainability,
Yeah.
because they are able to operate at that scale because they are making so many clothes.
Right.
So, but should we be making so many clothes?
Right. Right. Right.
Because let's say they're making, this is all theoretical. If they're making 75 cents or a dollar on each garment,
Mm-hmm.
but they're making billions of them,
Right.
that's great for them as a business. If you're making 75 cents or a dollar on each garment, but you're making like hundreds of thousands of them, that's like a totally different business story. So
Right.
I think that's where we're at right now, is trying to figure out, how do we get to that next wave of volume with a customer base that understands our story and that sees the value in paying a little bit more for our product. And
Yeah.
our products are actually, in most cases, price competitive with organic cotton and some of the more premium blanks companies. But you can find information on our wholesale on our website.
We'll make
And
sure to put all of Iris's everywhere apparel's information in the link. We'll put all the links below, and actually, not to I try not to plug my own company on this show, because that's not what this is about. But we are working to integrate the everywhere products into Tripod. So hoping to be one of the first platforms, where you can actually go and access this catalog and, you know, design products and publish them and sell them with very little friction.
I think that's the other thing too, Alex, is like the friction. Buying anything in today's market can be a very like confusing, difficult process. So that's another reason why I think we and I personally really gravitate towards print on demand, because it's a frictionless buying experience.
Yep.
And we don't want to confuse people. We want to make people feel confident about their decisions. We don't want them to think twice about the sustainability claims that we're making. And so I think making this as easy as possible is paramount to growing what we're doing.
Yeah. And what about the I mean, I know a decent amount about the manufacturing process, particularly in the sewing. And, that's one of the biggest bottlenecks, in my opinion, is just like, how do we how do we evolve from having to manually sew garments? I know some pretty extremely smart people doing some pretty interesting things around that. But do you see that as like a trend? Because you talked about not producing billions of garments to begin with. Like that's not really an efficient, sensible way of
Right.
doing things. So. if we know if we're confident that we can move the decorating piece into this more like on demand, quick turn kind of process with supporting like lots of or almost unlimited variability on
Hmm.
the print side. Is that possible? Do you see that being possible on the garment manufacturing side, like as things like sewing become automate or we're using some sort of adhesive technology or there's a lot of
Yeah.
different like things happening in that space. Um,
Yeah, I've often dreamed about an adhesive seam technology because and a sustainable adhesive, one a biodegradable adhesive because sewing thread is actually like one garment uses like thousands of yards of sewing thread.
oh,
And
really? I didn't know that.
yeah, and it's very difficult to make. You can make recycled synthetic sewing thread. So, like recycled polyester sewing thread is very common,
Hmm.
but it's very difficult to make recycled cotton or cellulosic sewing thread because you haven't figured out a way to make it strong enough yet
Right.
because there's so many performance concerns around sewing thread. So I personally love the idea of like an adhesive
Yeah.
seam, and I've thought about it a lot. I think that, cutting is pretty automated.
Yeah, yeah, that part's easy.
So it's really just like the piece handling once things are cut. And actually, piece handling is like quite difficult, and you can really mess up production if you mishandle the pieces. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure, that I think with human guidance is important at this
Yeah.
stage. But I do like the idea of like technology for seaming, technology for like joining.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the next phase. But I know what you're saying. I've met with some people who are working on Sobots, like fully automated machines for making t-shirts. I think that people tend to like over complexify that stuff and make a machine that's brilliant, but that at scale it also just like costs too much to use it. So I think making like smaller incremental changes to automate t-shirt production is probably
Yeah.
where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of cut and sew dye sub and trying to find the tough thing is always finding um not it's for it's really for us, it's not really about the price of the garment. I mean, obviously that's a factor, but the quality of the sewing is hugely important and you can only find that in certain parts of the world.
Mm,
And there's no like new sewers, so I've heard that's like a big problem where, I'm sure there's some, but it's just not, you don't have enough new sewers learning the trade that can like all right, we had some technical difficulties there, but we're back. I think where we left off was, we were just talking about, in my opinion, sewing, I think, is the biggest problem to solve on kind of like the apparel creation side. I agree with you that, piece handling is something that you definitely need human involvement. And the nice thing is that it's it's a process that you can train people on, whereas
yeah.
sewing is very difficult process to train people on.
It's sewing is really hard. I
Yeah.
mean, to get around certain seams, like learn specific operations, and then it just takes so much practice to become an expert. So yeah, it's definitely a very specialized skill.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's realistic, in the next 5 to 10 years to have like a factory that could essentially have your fabric that's like creating garments, maybe not in real time, but just in time, and then having like that be fed into a relatively automated print on demand process that can produce high volume.
I mean, I love the idea. I think that as a sustainable company, like we are up against a lot. So I tend to really appreciate ideas that help us get to market more quickly and provide services that are different from what like the main manufacturers can offer. So I'm all for it. I Yeah, I was just kind of thinking, I guess for print on demand, what would be like the ideal batch size? Because it's not like 10,000 units, right? It's probably like
Hmm.
500 or a few hundred pieces at a time. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Especially if the garment manufacturing is close to where the decorating is. I would think, yeah, at that point you're just kind of replenishing like, for that few days or week or something
Right.
like that. Um, so and I know that the decorating processes, particularly on printing, are just going to continue to get more and more automated. Whether
Yeah.
it's direct to go. I mean, you can see like Kornit has a new machine that's, I don't know if you've seen it. It's like this massive machine that has, mostly automated material handling.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's like $2 million, but you
Yeah,
load like a pallet, or you're basically just loading shirts, and then it kind of like handles the rest. But in direct to film, I think there's also a huge opportunity for perhaps even more opportunity for automation,
yeah. Mm,
because you're literally taking you're printing things, you're cutting them, you're placing them
right.
on things, and you're pressing them at different temperatures with different types of padding and things like that. So that I'm very confident in kind of automation and scalability
Yeah.
of print on demand, and that eventually um, being the economies of scale that you have with screen printing, um, versus print on demand sort of evolving
Yeah.
rapidly. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with with the garment manufacturing piece.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think we need to be more decorators and garment manufacturers have always needed to be more collaborative about this. And I mean, I was just thinking like some of the best printing we've done is actually on cut pieces, so it's not even on like fully assembled garments. And I was thinking about that as you were talking because you can use the lasers more easily on cut
Hmm.
garments than on sewn garments because there are always those tolerances or the stretch made it like this or like that, so your placement is slightly off. Um, so maybe there's a future where there is that sort of fully vertical system that inputs everywhere fabric and outputs like an exact garment with a lot less damage rate. And maybe if there is a misprint, we don't even need to sew that piece.
Right.
It's a misprint. So I think there's so many ways that we could be more collaborative in merch just in general with decorators.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, this is what gets me so excited about the next, 3, 5, 10 years of the industry, because it's evolving so rapidly. And the mindset about like kind of disruption and being open to change, that window is like fully open right now. Whereas 15 years ago, when I first got into the space, like it was not open in most,
Mhm.
everybody was kind of like stuck in their ways, and not wanting to disrupt anything. So I think it's
Yeah,
a really exciting time.
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think m part of the way I see it is that like a lot of promotional products and a decent amount of merch, it's sitting in sort of like a corporate budget, right? Like a marketing
Hmm.
budget. And so I think what I'm experiencing is that those companies they're either getting like more scrutinous of those budgets, or those budgets are shrinking, or they're becoming like actually the target of their sustainability strategy. Like, why should
Hmm.
you buy more merch?
Right. Right.
And this is where I think like us, the merch industry, we will have to become more innovative and even more innovative than what those companies may be producing and selling on a shelf,
Hmm.
because they're way more conservative about those supply chains. They don't want to like mess with their key SKUs that they're
Right.
distributing to the market. So I think um, it's making like merch and promo like a really great grounds for experimentation.
Absolutely. And do you see, when you mentioned a while back in the conversation, when you were talking about kind of like the process of, um, you know, sending you the garments, like, I mean, could you see a world where just like, I have my at my house, I have my trash can, my recycling, can. When I lived in Portland, they had a huge compost thing that they would pick
Yeah.
up. Like, do you see something like where you have just like a giant clothing, bin, and instead of Goodwill, you're just putting it in something outside your house, and then that's collected and run through this process?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen cool stuff like, you can put batteries in a bag and tape it on top of one of the bins. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely see like ideas for like extending those bins, whether each household needs its own
Right.
uh textile collection bin. Personally, I don't think so. One of the funny things about the composting thing, they just rolled that out across all of LA, and they made a plastic composting bin for every single house. I was like, oh my God, like, like maybe you should check with people first. Do they already have their own receptacle?
Right, right, right,
Um, you know, could it be a more sustainable material? I
right.
think these are all things we need to think about before rolling out like municipal collection. But I think it could be something that's organized on the neighborhood level, on the block level. It could be something that local retailers are incentivized to do. I mean, a lot of big box retailers have already rolled out in-store collection programs. Like Sephora has one for cosmetics packaging.
Mm-hmm.
Zara has in-store collection. I think H&M might have has in-store collection also of textiles. So it might be something that is more on the retailers,
Mm.
being the ones that are actually distributing those products. And I think that seems to be where the policy is going. And then I think we do need to think how does Goodwill and Salvation Army and other resellers like play into this whole system, because they can't just be seen anymore like places where you can just go dump everything undifferentiated.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, certainly we need better categorization of consumer goods in recycling. Like you shouldn't just be able to recycle a water bottle with a backpack with a pair of shoes.
Right, right.
It required totally different processes to like take apart.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, you don't want to make that too complex for the person who's trying to do the right thing. So I don't know, lots more to discuss there. I don't know that I
Yeah.
have a real
Yeah.
answer vision. I think my immediate train of thought is going to like pushing that onto retailers, making sure that whenever you're going to Target, to buy Tylenol or something, that if should you want to, you could bring a bag of clothes and there's like receptacle outside that store. Like that's
Yeah.
the appropriate like cadence.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then what type of scale is needed for your process in terms of the actual recycling, like sorting them, breaking them down? Is that something that like, is what is the capacity of that today, and how does that need to change?
Yeah, I mean our capacity, we require and to do a dedicated load of recycling, we require about 2,000 pounds of
Hmm.
material, which is, not a big deal for us. That's about, it's about 2,500 shirts or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so there's not really too many limitations on the input. Of course, it could be smaller. Like if you could recycle 10 tees at a time and do a new t-shirt, that'd be amazing.
Right, right.
Right now. In terms of the max like capacity, I would say right now, like between the partners we work with, partner shredders, domestically and also throughout Central America. I think the infrastructure is currently underutilized, so we have not hit that cap. Um, I think we could. I don't think we right now have the output level, of a Gildan, let's say for.
Hmm.
I think that would require some additional infrastructure investment. But to install like a textile recycling line is not, that expensive. I'll qualify that. It's like,
Yeah.
a few million to $5 million, something in this range. So, you know, we have been speaking with various potential partners about installing that infrastructure here in California, especially with the impending regulation around end of life textiles. That would make a lot of
Sure.
sense. It would also make a lot of sense because we do a lot of textile manufacturing, especially here in the LA area.
Hmm.
So there's definitely talks about how do we amplify the infrastructure. Although I think right now there's a lot more market share we could take right now with the existing infrastructure. We just need we need to be telling the right story. We need consumers to be resonating with circularity and with recycled materials. And then we need to find the right channel partners, hopefully a lot more in print on demand
Yeah.
to get this out there.
Well, that's great to know. I mean, if it's I was that was one part that was a little bit unclear to me is like how specialized is this process of, shredding and recycling? Like, is that going to be a huge bottleneck? And that's really encouraging to hear that, that part is there's a decent amount more capacity that's, not being utilized, and then it could be scaled pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, shredding is cheap, and the technology has been around since like the World War II era. They were
Wow.
in Europe where they were like shredding some of the old military uniforms. So it's a pretty tried and tested technology, and I think we could build a lot more on it. The alternative would be more of a chemical recycling process, which is growing as well. It's just it's pricey, it's expensive. That would be, for example, a technology that separates synthetic materials from cotton materials in a polycotton blend, or that just like turns cotton into a pulp and then you can like
Hmm.
extrude it or reconstitute it. So there's some other companies doing really interesting work in that area.
Wow. Well, this is super exciting. I learned a lot today. I mean, I already kind of knew about your, the general process, but it's just been so great to kind of like I think we met in 2020, like during
Yeah,
COVID,
yeah, yeah.
and to see the evolution of your company and the catalog and kind of the adoption of this technology, and now, and it's something that we hear more and more as a trend from customers, and even very large customers,
Yeah,
that are interested in this approach. And so, yeah, I think it's gonna be an exciting ride over the next decade. And, it's always fun to talk to people who are like pioneers of, like what what it's going to look like, in 10 years, not what it looked like 30 years ago.
totally. Right back at you, Alex. I feel the same way about you and what you're doing. And yeah, I think we're heading into a more sustainable, more intelligent, form of creating merch and promo. And yeah, really excited about what the future holds for all of us.
Great. And maybe for any branded merch sellers that are watching this, can you obviously we're going to be integrated, hopefully, in the next couple months. So that'll be a great option. But for anybody that's in branded merch selling today, what's the best way to buy your products and facilitate that?
Yeah, totally. Well, we have a pretty robust wholesale platform on our website, so you can go to our website, fill out a form, takes about 30 seconds, and one of our sales team members will reach out to you with our wholesale pricing, and you'll get a login, very similar to like any other blank supplier. But we are excited to answer any questions, and I think once you sign up, you do get a catalog that has a lot of the sustainability information I just explained in a more kind of nutshell form that's easier to communicate to your clients as well. So we always want to make sure that the people who are selling our products have the story information, so you can put that on your product page as well, because
Great.
it's not just our story, like it has to be all of our stories if we're going to really change how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Iris. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I learned a ton today. Hopefully, everybody listening learned a lot as well, and hopefully, we can work together to make things a lot more sustainable in this industry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care.